Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lit in Space podcast. This is Alessio, partner and CTO at Decibel Partners, and I'm joined by my co-host Swix, founder of Small AI.
Hello, hello. And today we're so happy to have Guy Gur-Ari on the pod from Augment Code. Welcome.
Thank you. Great to be here.
Guy, I was actually very excited to feature an Augment talk in our New York conference. And now it looks like you're coming up with some even bigger stuff with your new agents. So why don't we just get right into it? What are we announcing today?
Yeah, sounds good. So we're announcing our agent feature. This is a new feature that kind of takes coding with Augment to the next level. Previously, we had completions right around the cursor. We had next edit to change code away from the cursor. We had chat with code-based understanding. And today we're launching agent with code-based understanding. And so the agent can understand the request, understand where to make changes and how in the code base in a way that tries to be respectful of the code base's conventions and design. And then it can go and execute commands, run tests, all the way to getting to a working PR.
And well, maybe you don't want to say it to be humble, but this is going to be the number one SWE-Bench Verified agent, dethroning the weights and biases one that we previously featured.
Yeah, we just made number one on SWE-Bench. So for us, SWE-Bench has been a useful tool for exploring how can we get the most out of agents. And so we were able to get the best result on SWE-Bench Verified right now. Yeah.
And all on off-the-shelf models, right?
So yes, so the generation models for SWE-Bench, it's all off-the-shelf models. For the product, it includes our own custom trained models that help the agent with code-based understanding.
What's the delta between, have you run also the private models on SWE-Bench?
So we have seen a small delta when you include the code-based understanding, and that's something that we're digging into. What we found with SWE-Bench is an interesting benchmark, very useful for doing some things like refining prompts, for example, and trying out different tools. Specifically for code-based understanding, in the beginning, we were hopeful that it will tell us more about how we're doing there, but looking at the actual samples in SWE-Bench, they usually very often kind of pinpoint where the changes have to be made. And so we have not seen that much benefit from code-based understanding on this benchmark.
To tie in to another previous guest that we had, we also had Eric from Anthropic, who built the Anthropic version of their sort of agent. And it looks like you also had some kind of sequential thinking MCP usage. You want to talk a little bit about that? What I'm trying to do is also promote the different elements of the agents that were useful that people may often miss when they build agents.
Yeah, definitely sequential thinking helped bump the score. There were a few things that helped. So sequential thinking lets the model kind of reflect and do better. Another thing that helped was at the end, run the agent a few times and ensemble those scores. I think we ended up using a 1 for that. And so if you can afford that extra cost, then ensembling also helps. And then there were other things like just when you start out building an agent, getting file edits to be reliable is also by itself a non-trivial task and one that we iterated on as well. Yeah.
And when you say the sequential thinking part is interesting because it's not reasoning mode, do you have a good way to just summarize why the sequential thinking MCP performed better than just reasoning mode on Sonnet 3.7? Or is it just the results were better? That's the TLDR.
Yeah, I don't think I have a good insight for that. We tried reasoning mode as well with the new 3.7, and we didn't see that much of a bump in performance. We don't know if this is something that's code specific or not. I don't have an insight. We tried both, and yeah, sequential thinking worked better.
I think the experimentation approach is probably the right one. It's just interesting that you have to ensemble these models. You can't just be sort of single source in your models. It would be neat, because then you can sort of deploy your agent across all environments. Whereas here, there's some clouds that are friendly to OpenAI, some clouds are more friendly to Anthropic. You have to kind of be cross-cloud. I feel like there's an old argument in developer toolings where you have to be hybrid cloud in order to maximize the benefits. And I think there's a little bit of hybrid model argument going on in the state of the art.
Yeah, I think we're at that point of when you build a real system, you have to support multiple clouds and you have to support multiple models. So our system from the beginning had multiple models because even for completions, you had a generation model for doing the generation, but for retrieval, we had separate retrieval models. And over time, we actually had multiple different retrieval models working. So we've had that built into the system for a while. I think for agents, one thing that becomes that becomes an issue pretty quickly is cost. These models are very capable, but they're also very expensive. And so that by itself is a reason to start mixing and matching different models in the system.
Yeah, amazing. Just kind of curious because this is something I've been thinking a lot about. Is there an experimentation framework that you like or process that you like? Is it just notebooks everywhere? Have you built your own tooling? Have you seen other tooling elsewhere that you have brought in?
This is a question about how to evaluate models.
Experimentation framework. It's almost like it's not just evaluations. I mean, evaluations, you bench and your own internal evals, but also do you just run a battery of tests every single time? Do you have a well-defined process? Do you have tooling that you built that might be interesting to dig into? Right? Like I think as a founder of any AI company, basically every founder needs this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say the process that I like to follow is in the beginning when developing a feature, come up with a curated set of samples. Could be as small as 10 samples that you run through. And then, it's all notebooks, basically. You run through the samples. The data set is small enough that you can keep it in your head. You become kind of very familiar with those samples and you see how well iterations improve or regress on them. Beyond a certain point, that's not good enough anymore. And then you go to hundreds or sometimes maybe thousands or more of samples. So we have infrastructure for doing these kinds of evaluations, both with and without code execution. So code execution, like checking the correctness of solutions and running tests automatically can help, Although you can get a lot of mileage out of evals that don't have code execution in them, that just compare against ground truth. The other thing that we found to be very useful is there is often a gap between what you do in research and what you have in production. Those systems are not always the same. And so we've worked to make sure that at least some of our evaluations that we use in research, we can also run the production system against them. And so whenever we deploy a new model, if it's one of our own models, we will automatically run those evals, and then we will see if there were any regressions. That's meant to catch. Yeah. The last thing I can mention is we use contractors for evaluation where we cannot do automatic evaluation. So with chat and agents, it becomes way harder to do things automatically. And so we use contractors for that.
And then just to wrap up on the tool side, we talked about sequential thinking. I saw in your press release also, you mentioned how string replace is like better than smart paste. Are there any other interesting small technical wins that you had that you want to highlight?
Let me see. I think that plus the ensembling, I think that those were the major ones.
Yeah. And let's also clarify on the ensembling. You mentioned you just did kind of basic majority voting thing because the cost was kind of gonna go too high. Are there any promising directions that you saw were kind of like, maybe good result wise, but the cost was like too expensive that you didn't pursue that you would want other people to spend more time on?
You mean besides the ensembling?
Yeah, like even when you mention I'm reading from the blog post, you decided not to investigate this direction because of significant extra cost. Like if it costs 10 times more, how much more of a result will we get? Is it busy? Like if the models start going down in cost, are we just going to do more of that?
Yes, I expect we will. I think it will become less of over time as cost will come down. I expect it will become less of a cost question and more of a UX question because with ensembling, well, what we found is that users really want to see what the agent is doing and follow along. And if you're doing ensembling, you don't have one trajectory anymore, you have several. And then the question of how do users supervise that as it's happening becomes pretty tricky. Like you can present the results after it's done, but typically users don't like waiting that long to see what's happening. They want to make sure the agent is on the right track. So I think even if the cost ends up making sense, and it might, the UX will become a problem. In terms of how much more you can squeeze out of this, yeah, I would guess you can get a few more percentage points at least with better ensembling, because what we did is very simple, and I know others have been experimenting with this as well. I don't think it's ensembling is usually not the kind of thing that just solves a benchmark, just also in other domains. You typically can get and for SWE-Bench, probably a few percentage points is my guess.
Yeah. And then there is something that you tried doing a more multi-agent approach with like the orientation agent and the regression fixing agent. Can you maybe talk people through that and what results you had?
Yeah, so we found for agents that orientation in particular is extremely important for getting good value out of the agents. And so I believe we have this orientation phase where we try to look around the code base. And this is something we're also building into the product. Look around the code base and try to understand the conventions. For SWE-Bench, this is mostly around testing and how you execute the test. That's the main thing. But for the product, there is more than that. There is try to figure out testing, try to figure out what frameworks are being used, if we can figure out the versions that are being used. All those things help give users a much better out-of-the-box experience when they use agents.
Yeah. Is that the onboarding process with Augment? Like when people sign up for your product, there's kind of like a agent that gets in there and starts to learn everything and codifies it?
So there are a few things. The onboarding that we have is meant to be kind of a quick process, and that does a little bit of orientation. The next thing after that, we've built in memories. So with memories, the agent tries to learn from its mistakes as it makes them. And so then at least if it made a mistake, it's not going to make that mistake again. If it's something that's generally true about the code base, things like these are the conventions of how we store tests, or this is how we run them. So the agent learns along with you as it's working. And we also have a feature that I think has not shipped yet, but we are planning to ship, which is a more thorough orientation. So this is something that will run for several minutes probably, and try to do a pretty thorough job of trying to figure out what languages do you have, what kind of how to run tests, how to do frameworks, and so on. That's coming.
Okay. Anything else on multi-agent? I was going to move on to more sort of broader topics other than just the agent feature.
No, yeah. I think that's good. Yeah.
One thing. Okay. One way I would maybe put the hot potato question to you is how I think there are a lot of people trying to solve agents, coding agents for the enterprise. Let's just call it that. There would be Devin, there would be Factory AI, there would be Source Graph. How would you compare your philosophy in draw the landscape for us? Like where are you in the top right corner of, and what would be the X and the Y axis?
Right. Good. Yeah. So for us, I can try on the fly to convert it to a graph, but let's see. So our product is meant for developers who are working in organizations that have large complex code bases. This is really what we're optimizing for. It's less about 0 to 1 development, and it's more about working within existing large code bases. That's why we invested a lot in the context engine from the beginning. And if you use our product, you can kind of get the sense that it's more meant for that kind of work. Compared to, I would say, Devin and Factory, our philosophy is that we want to meet developers where they are. And so our product is a set of extensions. You have VS Code. We are launching JetBrains agent as well. So we have support for JetBrains. We have a Vim plugin. And so we really try to not ask developers to change their workflow. And this is why we've built the first agent into the IDE. Having said that, it's clear to us that agent usage is going to explode. The kind of the thing that you notice pretty quickly as you get the hang of using agents, as you get past the initial learning curve, the magic kind of wears off, and it becomes obviously really slow. And not only is it slow, it also takes over your whole workspace. And so that's where we think that being able to run multiple agents and not just one is going to be the way to unlock, honestly, most of the value out of these agents. And that's what we're working toward. But it's all with a sense of we still want to build this for developers, and we still want to meet developers where they are and not try to change how they do things.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the other comparisons also would be, you said Magic, like there's magic.dev and Poolside also trying to go to market with extensions. But I guess those are training proprietary models, right? They're investing a lot of money in that, and you've just decided to do no custom models here.
Yes, I would say for now. So for us, there's always the question of for every feature, do we use an off-the-shelf model or an external model, or do we train our own? I think for now, for agents, except for the code-based understanding, we outsource the models. However, we believe that the cost of these, or let's say, we believe that the usage of agents is going to explode. And as a result, the cost is going to explode as well. And so we feel that there is room here for training custom models to help with that. But yes, for now, building a product and going to market quickly, this is what we've prioritized. And there's clearly a lot of demand for these things out there. So we're pretty happy with that decision. Yeah.
And then lastly, in terms of where going, I think we're going to go for a demo soon. In terms of developers where they are, can I use Augment inside of Cursor? Would it make sense?
Yes, you can use Augment inside of Cursor. We actually have quite a few users doing that.
Yeah.
And what we found is that they like things like next edit. They like the code base understanding. And so, yes, you can absolutely do that.
Yeah, we would love to do a quick demo product run through just so people can see it too on YouTube.
Sounds good. Let me set it up here.
We can always cut the silence as well.
The setup, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it's all edited, which is nice. I see it. Yeah, it's got a good zoom as well. You can make it full screen and also hide the menu bar if that helps. That works.
Let's see. Sorry, this is from the trial run. I'm assuming we can cut all of this out. So this is from the trial run. The hardest part about this is that, or the riskiest part is not the agent, but getting it to build, because VS Code extensions, this is going to be like in trying to add a feature to the agent using the agent. Yes. And so I thought that would be fun. And the problem is VS Code extensions, I don't know how much you've played with them, but they are tricky to build.
You have to reload them. Yes, I maintain one for one of my previous companies.
So let me destroy this and this. I might just start this again.
We use Bazel. Nice.
We use Bazel, yes. Yes. Quite a few ex-Googlers at the company.
Right.
And so this is somewhat familiar.
There's a startup called Bazel.builds, which I heard some buzz about when they left Google, but I'm not sure where they are. Like some Bazel-based.
Actually, interesting.
Yeah, there's like Build Buddy too. Yeah. Anyway.
Okay, looks like it's building. I think this looks promising. Somewhat. All right. I think worst case, yeah, this looks good. All right. Worst case, I think we will just show the code and not show it running, which is not as good, but at least the code will show up. All right. I think this is right. Let me just switch here and switch to this. All right, shall we go?
Whenever you're ready.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm going to show a quick demo of the agent, going from ticket to working code. And so we're actually going to use the agent to add a feature to itself inside the IDE. And the idea is here, we're going to do something pretty simple, which is let's give the agent a new tool that it can call to pop up a dialog box for the user asking it, okay, cancel. And then once it has that tool, it can decide to autonomously use it whenever it wants. So we use Linear for managing tickets. So I'm going to copy the ticket ID. And within Augment, we have both MCP support for complete extensibility of tools, but we've also built in a few first-party integrations and serve them as tools to the agent. So we have GitHub, Linear, Notion that we use internally, and then we have several others. And so here I should be able to tell it, implement ticket with the ticket ID. I'm going to tell it to just implement, don't run it, because we have our own build system, and I know it's going to be eager about trying to go and like build the code and so on, and I don't want it to do that. All right. So the idea here is that we see the agent going on the right, and it's basically hacking on its own code. This is the code of the extension that's currently running inside VS Code, and we're going to get a new extension version out of this. So the first thing it did was it went to linear to grab information about the ticket, so it understands what that is. And then you can see it immediately reaches for the Augment context engine to get oriented and understand how to go about performing its task. And so here it asks about, okay, let's figure out how tools are implemented in the VS Code extension. And it's going to keep, it's going to do probably a few of these retrieval calls and then come up with a plan and then start implementing it. So this should take, I think, a couple minutes. While it's doing that, I want to highlight a feature that I mentioned before, which is memories. So memories is where the agent learns and adapts to the user as the user is using it. And you can click on memories and you can see a little Augment logo that's getting animated. But below that, you can see all the memories that the agent has collected, and you can edit them and add to them if you like. All right, so it looks like the agent came up with a plan, which is to create a new class and then define the input schema and so on and so forth. And we can see that it's starting to actually go ahead and edit some files. We can follow along with what it's doing either in the drawer at the bottom, or we can actually also open the version control pane and see what it's doing. So far, it made just a small change, registering this new tool in the local tools that the agent has access to. And now it's going to implement probably the bulk of the work, which is, I guess it decided to call it the show dialog tool. Let me make this a bit bigger. So you can see that it managed to understand within our whole code base what class it should inherit from, how to implement this tool interface. So it knows about language model tools, but it needs to adapt it to our own interface. We have a safety feature for tools, so it needed to implement that, calling the tool, and then integrating that also with the VS Code API to actually show. All right, let's see. I think it should be close to being done. Okay, it's taking some liberty here of also adding it to chat, not just the agent. Yes.
It just wants to work.
It just wants
to be productive.
Exactly. All right. I think, let's see. Oh, there's an issue with the imports. I think it's going to be fine.
Nice.
All right. I think I can stop it here because it's probably going to be fine. And I'm going to try to actually run this now and see if we can see it in action. All right. So this built the extension, the new version of the extension that's supposed to have the tool. If I open this and close this, there we go. I'm going to switch to agent mode here, and then I'm going to ask it to call it, and let's see if this works. All right, and here it is. This is a sample dialog message. Click OK or cancel, and if I click OK, it's going to tell me, yeah, I understand I should use the repository version. So it's yeah, so that's it. Oh, actually, we can take another step and actually tell it to, okay, great, create a PR from this, because we also have the GitHub integration. And then it's going to go create a branch, check in everything, and then push a PR to GitHub, because it's connected both to Linear and GitHub. And this is what allows for like an end-to-end workflow. So for GitHub, we're being a bit more careful with the commands. You have to click play to actually run these, because this is an external system and it's not so easy to revert if the agent messes up. But then it goes and like starts creating branches and committing them and all the normal stuff for getting a PR. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really impressive.
But what's the plan for like moving it out of the IDE? Do you also see a world in which just in Linear you can say, please implement, and then you don't have to actually open VS Code and be on top of it?
Yeah, so that's a great question that we ask ourselves almost on a weekly basis. These things are getting powerful quickly. And there are, like, if you're doing 0 to 1 development, it seems it's already at a point where you don't need a lot of the IDE, or maybe not even an IDE at all, to get to something that works and iterating on it. What we found so far is that when you're working in complex code bases, it's still quite often that you need to use the IDE to make changes. And so for now, our product is going to be in the IDE because of this reason. And also when we add support for multiple agents, we expect that it's still going to be in there. And this is also based on feedback from early users. I think in the future, at some point, my guess is that the IDE is going to become less of the focal point and more like an app that you can launch when you need to dig in deeper, but you spend most of your time away from it. So maybe 80% of your time is in a website or an app where you control the agents, and then 20% of your time, maybe you go into the IDE. But I feel like for the developers that we're targeting, we're not quite there yet.
I would agree. I think you would scare a lot of people by saying, the IDE goes away and becomes, a smaller part of your workflow. People are very religious about their IDEs. As the resident MCP guy, I know you have MCP support. I also wonder your personal takes on MCP. What is it helpful? Is it just a fad? What do you think?
Yeah, It's certainly helpful if you're willing to go and learn about it and get past the friction of setting up tools, but it gives users so much control over things that they can do, right? If we don't have that integration built into the product, you can connect it, you can connect our agent to any of your systems. And they could be external systems that we just haven't gotten around to implementing yet, or they could be our own internal systems. We try to cater both to let's call them more power users in terms of these integrations, but also make it really easy for developers who just want to go through 3 clicks and connect their agent to GitHub or Linear or any of the other popular tools. So yeah, I think MCP absolutely has a place in this ecosystem, clearly also based on the adoption, and we will definitely continue to support it.
Are you gonna remove your custom hand integrations and replace them with MCPs, like the Linear, GitHub, the ones that you showed? At some point, they're all going to have MCPs, right? Do you think there's still value in just building your own thing on top of it?
Yeah. So as far as I know, I think the main thing to figure out is, again, it's not an agent quality thing. Those are just the same. It's more making the authentication story really good for developers. This is why we've built it ourselves, because now if MCP has an authentication story that we can use to make it as seamless as we can ourselves, then yeah, we would definitely consider it, because it's easier to standardize on one way of extending the toolset.
Yep. Awesome, man. This was great. I know you mentioned you're gonna do some RL on your custom models now to improve them. Any interesting areas of research that you've seen in that space? Anything net new that you wanna shout out that you've seen?
There was an interesting paper. I think it's called. There was an interesting paper called SWE-RL, which I thought was a really nice paper on how to do RL specifically for coding. So that's by Wei and other authors. So I'd recommend if you're interested in RL for coding, besides the normal things. So I think the DeepSeek paper R1 was very good. Understanding DPO and the variants like GRPO is very popular now. These are all great things to look up. And specifically for coding, recently I really like the SWE-RL paper.
Yeah. A lot of exciting, and thanks for the pointers on the papers. Actually, I'm going to go look them up and try to add to my list. You mentioned that a lot of your team is ex-Google. Eric Schmidt is a backer. What's your take on this as a general Gemini Google revival? You're on the Palm 2 team. What seems to be what should people view the Gemini progress as, right? 2.5 Pro is out, and by some accounts it's one of the best models in the world. It is the best model in the world. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been pretty interesting to see how this all developed. I think when I left Google for Augment, so actually the week I gave notice at Google was the week ChatGPT came out, and so this was certainly, well-known.
Not related.
Not related. No. Everything happened before. Everything happened before, unrelated to ChatGPT. I was actually at a conference then. I think it was in Europe. So I'm not really sure. ChatGPT came out. Everybody was talking about it. It just all happened to coincide. And I think it's well known that this was kind of a crisis moment for Google. From what I hear from friends, it seems, they're obviously taking it super seriously, and the culture has really shifted internally to be a lot more startup-y, fast-moving, aggressive. And And at least folks I talk to are optimistic about Google's chances to win this. Lots of good people there, very motivated, clearly are making like solid progress on the models. It's still a race, but I think the sentiment that I'm hearing seems to be pretty positive, I would say.
Yeah, I think people have really seen that Google has kind of woken up. I just don't know what it would take to get to the next level. Like if Demis or whoever at DeepMind came and asked us like, okay, what do we need to ship in order to like take mindshare from here? You already have the best scored model, LMSys. You already have one of the fastest, cheapest models with Flash. And then you already launch with like, native image generation. Like what is the frontier that people care about? I don't know, man. What else is left?
Well, I mean, AGI. I mean, we're moving, we're moving rapidly, but I wouldn't. I mean, some people say that like, oh yeah, this is all AGI already. I don't feel that way. Like I can, again, going back to coding. On the one hand, this stuff is brilliant and magical and does sometimes hold PRs for me, but sometimes, like, and more often than not, I really have to take a task and break it down to bite-sized pieces and feed it. So I think if we're asking what's the headroom here, there's a ton of room for improvement. I think it's still day one as far as I can tell in terms of model quality.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. It's funny because like we won't know how bad today's models are until 2 years from now, where we can compare and go like, oh yeah, of course, like, why would you ever use Gemini 2.5? Well, yeah, I think that's all the questions we had. Any calls to action?
Yeah, please go to augmentcode.com, download the extension, start using the agent and all our other features. And especially if you have a large, complex code base, you will see the value right away.
And if you don't mind sharing your code for training purposes, individual developers can use it too, right? That's something I picked up from your previous podcast there. Yeah.
So, yes, that's right. We have a free tier where our code is available for training purposes. Maybe another thing is since we talked about SWE-Bench, we actually open sourced our implementation of SWE-Bench. So if you're curious how we got to number one, you'll be able to go see all the details of how we did it.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Actually, that would be a very good contribution to the community. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Guy.
Yeah. Thanks so much. This was fun. Thanks.